Jeff Allen here again on the Working with the French video series. And I'm going to cover one of the other points about the Hofstede and all their work on the six dimensions of national culture. And the dimension I want to cover here is about individualism versus collectivism. And so I'm going to kind of read what individual and collectivism are here and there, at least a kind of an explanation here. And then I'm going to kind of explain how the French kind of fit into this. So individualism, which can be defined as a preference for a loosely knit social network in which individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and their immediate families, right? And collectivism, kind of the other side of the spectrum, is which represents a preference for a tightly knit framework in society in which individuals can expect their relatives or members of a particular group or in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. The French are more of the latter. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that they're not individualistic, because they're very individualistic on their rights. Okay, their rights for certain things like transport and pay and all that kind of stuff and days off. They're really into that. They're really into fighting for a number of days off to the death. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's so much for fighting an extra days off, whereas they already got quite a bit of time off compared to other countries. But it's a collective culture, in the sense that it's a socialist state in general. Of course, it's a social democracy, okay? So, but it's capitalistic too, right? So it's not really the whole thing of socialism and all that. It's kind of a complicated thing, right? Because there is no true pure socialism. Okay, I mean it's a mixture of things because a lot of things that we call are still capitalistic with a heavy touch of socialism, or with even collectivism to the concept of communism, right? And I'm not trying to judge anything. Everything kind of works in its own way, right? So, but the whole thing of this whole thing about the network, the framework of society with individuals can expect their relatives and families. Families are a really important thing in France. It's a really important thing. You don't want to abandon your family. You don't want to get your family pissed off at you, all right? Um, and and I've seen families where it didn't. It just it falls apart. The family is really important. So and there's this concept of taking care of looking after your children. I mean, to the mother hen is there, very present. Pascal Baudry talks about this in the education chapter in his book of the French and Americans. The other show, he definitely talks about this. He says the Americans, the French are just opposite sides on this. The mother hen, is like, and they'll critique their children all the time, but they're so overbearing that the kids want to get out of it when they're high school, when they're young adults. They just want to get out of it finally because they're finally getting free, because they'll never be able to get free. But it's very family owned, very family oriented, which is a very positive thing, very very positive. And the loyalty thing is very strong, um, in the strong that it's relational. Okay, and when a family member breaks relations with their family, it's really painful. It's really, really painful, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Your friendships end and they end for life, that kind of way. Um, and in the U.S., it's kind of like, hey, you come back again, or hey, had a big dispute, yeah, you get together again, and a while after, and you kind of just brush it off, right? The friendship isn't that way. The circles of relations are so tight that it's very close, and it's really hard to reestablish that thing if it's been broken. So it's a very the collectivism aspect of it is it's it's interesting because it's not like the Chinese, okay, and that's different. because that's even a deeper level of collectivism where it's really about the whole population. And the French are kind of that way with the whole idea of solidarity. There is a lot of solidarity. Solidarity is a really high value, very, very high value. In fact, solidarity is like, I never heard the word solidarity in English until I came to France, and I learned the word solidarity because the concept isn't. It's just like because America, the U.S. is very individualistic, very individualism, which is the other half of this, right? But the French they're really in solidarity and helping people and all that, and helping the poor and helping the lesser, the underdogs and all that. So so this whole thing of the collectivism thing, it's a very collectivism culture with traits of individualism. Okay, that's how I'd explain it. Um, with some things of individualism, but especially rights. But the rights are usually for the collectivism thing because it's a right for everybody. They're fighting for the rights of everybody, right? It's usually not for one's own rights. It's for the rights of everybody else. The striking is not for one's own rights. It's for the rights of at least a segment of the population. It's not necessarily a majority segment of the population, but it's a segment of the population. It's not for an individual. Okay, so that's where it's not quite individualistic, and that's why I want to clarify that, because in the U.S. it's usually my own right, my own right, except for guns. That's all of us have guns, right? But it's usually my me. Where in the U.S., but here it's really for it's a segment of the population. So. Usually a company or an institution or a trade, that kind of a job kind of trade. So that's the one on individualism versus collectivism. I'm not going to try to go into more detail about this because we're going to get this in the summary at the end where I'm going to kind of combine all these things together and kind of go through and walk through it. But kind of gives you a little bit more detail about this understanding the French from these points of view.